I got a mic on my back.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to what is the final session of our virtual State of Black Learning 2020. We want to thank all of you who have been participating over the past few weeks in what we believe to be one of the largest turnouts so far in the State of Black Learning experience. We are grateful for all of your support and participation and, frankly, your flexibility. This conference has really been a labor of love for so many people, and so I would be remiss if I did not thank all of the individuals on the planning committee, all of our sponsors and supporters, from the Grable Foundation to Manchester Academic Charter School to our friends at Penn Hills Entrepreneurial Charter School, and all across the city, from LaTrinda Sherrill and Charnay Hearn to our team here at the Urban Academy. Thank you all so very much for what you have done. We've had some great series over the past 3 weeks, and today we're going to cap it off with our Parent Power panel. Today is designed to really showcase the parent voice, to ensure that their perspectives solidify the work that we have done over the past 3 weeks, to ensure that in the ever-changing learning landscape, we are exploring what remote learning will be like, talking about homeschooling, race, racism, and resources that are at our disposal as families and as parents as we embark upon the new normal in our learning experience. Today, joining us as guest moderator and panelist is Mrs. Muffy Mendoza. She is the founder and chief executive officer of Brown Mamas, which is an organization that is nationally known and focuses on providing socialization opportunities to Black mothers and connects them to resources and information. Muffy is also a homeschooling mother of 2 boys, so I mean, her perspective is going to be super critical during this session, and we're looking forward to everything that Muffy has for us. Additionally, we are excited to have Ms. Keysha Gomez. She is the executive director of Hope for Tomorrow, which is an after-school and summer program which focuses on youth and family organizations.
Is he stuck for everybody?
Yep, he stopped for everyone. So I will pick up for him as his video comes back on in just a second. So we have Keysha Gomez, Executive Director of Hope for Tomorrow After School Program and Summer Camp, which is a youth and family organization serving families based in Pittsburgh's West End. We also have Christian Hughes, founder of Drafting Dreams, STEM programming and educational program that teaches architecture to K through 12 students across the Pittsburgh region. And lastly, Ms. Nichole Sims, who is the parent lead at A+ Schools, where she works to engage and advocate on behalf of parents and their interests within the Pittsburgh Public School District. So I'm going to throw it over to Ms. Muffy to get us started.
Hey everybody, what's up? I hope everybody is doing well and having a great afternoon. What's up, Keysha, Nichole, and Christian? How are y'all doing today?
Pretty good, and yourself?
I'm doing good. I cannot complain. So I pretty much, if you follow, I'm sorry, Nichole, I didn't hear you. How you doing?
I just said I'm hanging in there. Hi, everybody.
Oh, that's good. Oh, Chase is back. Chase, you got anything you want to say since you're back now?
The devil is alive. What he wasn't gonna do is mess with my internet connection.
Not today.
Lord come on, man, devil! I rebuke you. Get away from this final session. All right, y'all. I love you. I'm gonna turn my camera off now. I'm gonna mute myself. I'm gonna turn it over to Muffy. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Chase, for inviting me and our other panelists to this panel discussion. I attended the State of Black Learning for the first time last year, and it was great. I walked away with a lot of experiences and learned a lot. even as a homeschooling parent, about bringing some of the perspectives of some of the educators that were there into our homeschool and into our learning as a way of lifestyle. So we'll just go ahead and jump right in and get started. So the first question, wait, let me find my questions. Now, y'all know if you've ever listened to me on a live video, I'm very impromptu. And I like to just talk and have a good conversation,
Right.
and just speak our truths as individuals, as members of our communities, and as Black people. And I think that's kind of what the State of Black Learning is about. But my first question that I had is for us to talk a little bit about our thoughts on the current state of education from a parenting and caregiver perspective. All of us work closely with kids. We do a lot with kids. We're with kids all day, every day. If not, we're with parents all day, every day. So let's talk a little bit about what we're hearing and also our personal perspectives on the current state of education in our country. Who want to go first?
I can jump in, Muffy.
Go ahead, Keysha.
So that's a really good question, talking about the state of education. And as I think about that, I think that we are in a hurricane, right? So I was going to say that we're in a storm, but that really wouldn't give justice to the magnitude of chaos that we're facing right now. Also, when you think about a storm, you think about the calm before the storm. And if anyone knows education like we know it, we know that there was no calm before the storm. There was no calm. The state of education has been jacked up, right? So I personally have had to find an elementary, middle, and high school for my children to attend here in Pittsburgh, or even, I'm from Miami. It's been hard. Even living in Atlanta, it's been hard to find a good school system. And it actually felt like there was a system in place, dare I say, that would make it that our children cannot thrive, right? So we are in the middle of a hurricane, and there has to be something to get us out of this. We need a lifeboat, we need a raft, we need a SOS, something to get us out of this.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Keysha, because a lot of times I feel like as Black parents in particular, it's kind of like we kind of have this double-edged sword about when it comes to education. We can either send our kids to primarily white environments where there's no cultural competency, where there's no culture that looks anything, that symbolizes anything that they might see on a daily basis, or we can send them to the predominantly Black schools or predominantly minority schools that we often live in those neighborhoods, and then we have to suffer through, lack of good teachers, lack of really good curriculums to even, challenge our kids. Do you want to chime in on that a little bit, Nichole or Christian?
I certainly do. So as we keep hearing, I echo what Keysha says, of course, and as we keep hearing about the state of Black learning, and specifically in Pittsburgh, we all understand that the system isn't broken. Some people think the system's broken, but it isn't. It's functioning exactly how it's supposed to. It's failing Black children. It's serving, two demographics. And as was mentioned, I, as a parent, my background is in human resources. And when I was no longer working in that field and I had an opportunity to think about what I wanted to do, what happened was caring for my daughter, my older daughter, her educational needs, it took a front seat. So I ended up sort of doing that while I finished school for me and did some other things. But, that's what I was doing. And so advocating for my own daughter in school. So just all of the glaring inequities and stuff like that. I don't feel, so school choice, I would certainly say, has been a blessing for my family, and being able to find the right village for my children. I have a 12-year-old, 13-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old granddaughter who are both within, the public education system. And so I don't feel, I don't feel hopeless. I think that there can be some changes, but right now things are just really bad for a lot of parents and students.
I'm going to echo Nicole's sentiments in the sense that the system was already set up for our kids to fail. Muffy, you made a great point about, do we choose to enroll our kids into a predominantly white school, and you know, they have all these, you know, social problems and all the things that come with that? Or do we stay in the hood where we are, but have to deal with schools that, quite frankly, are underfunded? And because they're either underfunded or the funds have been most misappropriated, whatever you want to call it, but they're underfunded, which means that, you know, you're not paying the teachers enough. So the teachers are not caring enough unless they care, you know. So I think that everything that's going on now really has pulled the blanket off of what was being, or rather pulled the rug up off of what has been swept up under the rug for so long. But I think that we are also in a very critical point right now. This is a critical nexus in education where everybody is starting to see, okay, what we were doing did not work, clearly, because it's not surviving this pandemic. And I think everybody is at least amenable to being able to make a shift.
And I think it's really important to point out that, like, and this is a conversation I'm constantly having with my friends, is that a lot of parents are feeling right now like, all right, the education system in our country, in our communities, in our cities, has not worked for forever. We know that it's not broken. It's working as it was intended to work, which was to basically create servants. But many parents are feeling right now like they're being left with the bag. So nothing worked for decades, centuries, and now parents are in this position where it's like, oh, well, now it's your turn. You fix the problem. As a homeschooling parent, I understand that, but I'm weary of that perspective, but I also do understand that perspective, because once I started spending more time in the school, similar to what Nichole did, I started to see that there was a lot that was wrong, and I wasn't sure if I could fix it, but I knew I wanted to try. So from that perspective, can we talk a little bit about what we feel like some of the solutions are? We can all just give one solution. I know we can't like completely create a business plan for fixing, you know, public education right now in this time frame, but let's try to give one solution for what parents can do right now at home, because all of our kids are at home right now, to at least assist, or I don't even know what word I'm looking for, but to make it better. Is there anything? Because you can say no too.
So you're saying the entire system, Muffy.
And listen, I'm trying to put a cherry on top of this.
Right. So my immediate thought to that is kind of the work that we do with Hope for Tomorrow. We're not a school. We're not aiming to be a school. We're just trying to supplement your child's education by offering tutoring and academic enrichment, and also by offering life skills. That's what we're trying to do. We know that not all children are going to thrive in the school system, whether it's in a schoolhouse or whether it's at home. Academics may not be their thing. And we also need to have a lot more socialization. So having your child enrolled in programs where they can get extra help, having tutors that can assist them, that's something that I think is an immediate response to what's happening. Yes, we can all see the system is failing. Yes, we can see that there's some systemic issues going on, but we also have to be proactive or have some early intervention and take the lead on our child's education.
Agreed.
I would also that demand and organize. Me personally, prior to this call, I was not a parent. I'm still not a parent, but I'm taking on guardianship for my teenage cousin who I lost my aunt earlier in the year. And, you know, I'm coming into this thing already knowing what the system is like, already knowing what's available and what resources are not. You know, so technically I'm coming in as a parent who's kind of a little bit more informed than most. But for other parents who aren't coming into this with the type of knowledge of the systems and the funding and et cetera, you know, that I have, I would suggest that you definitely organize and mobilize and strategize and advocate on you all's behalf about what is missing. Whatever you don't have before you, whatever you need, whatever is not happening for you, you're not the only parent experiencing that. You're not the only parent that is having that deficit, you know, so, and we all know that there definitely is strength in numbers. So I would just give that tidbit.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I like that.
And of course, I agree with all of that. It's kind of hard to think of one thing, But overall, I was going to also say advocacy. So there's certain steps that each of us can take, whether we're parents or we're community members. But we need to advocate for the public education that our children deserve. They're not getting it. And so for me, that looks like learning how the system operates, you know, being part of, that's how I became part of A+ schools. Initially, I was going to advocate for my daughter. And then I was like, just baffled about the idea that there were so many parents that had no idea of all the things I was learning, right? My daughter was being sort of, she's kind of sassy. A couple of her teachers call her saucy. So she was starting down the same path as my older daughter, where she was beginning to be labeled. And for asking questions and understanding what was being asked of her, she was beginning to be sort of guided toward that school to prison pipeline that we know girls are now feeling faster than boys. So I would certainly say advocacy. You know, for me, I wanted to show other parents that it is possible for you to engage. It is possible for you to make your voice heard. It isn't always put into action. We saw, you know, yesterday where the school board kind of did whatever they wanted to do and left out the parent voice. And so sometimes it doesn't work, but a lot of times it does, whether we agree with the fact that there's no in-house schooling, but sports are going to be allowed now, you know, whether we agree with that or not. That was a lot of parent voice, right? And so parents step up for what they think is important. And I would just say, remember that we're advocating for every child, not just our own. You know, all children deserve, because quite frankly, my kids go to Manchester Academic Charter School and they're good. So I still advocate for them. I still advocate for other children. So I could go on and on about that all day. It's just so important. I feel like education is a building that's on fire, especially in Pittsburgh. And there are some of us that are like, y'all see what is going on? Like, it's on fire. And now people are starting to see that a little bit more because of the district's response to COVID, or lack thereof. And yeah, advocate, make your voice heard, vote in the school board elections. Those are coming up next year. The primary is in May, you know, because that's important. I feel like that's a start to getting what we need and making improvements in education in Pittsburgh as well.
If I can piggyback on what Nichole just said, I was just reading through Pittsburgh Public Schools, some thread on Facebook where there was an issue with the shortage of computers, right? There's a lack of technology. And so the parents were jumping on saying, how come the kids at Kappa have so many MacBooks, but the other schools don't? And so my child attended Kappa. She just graduated from Kappa this year. And I was thinking, yeah, they've been had computers, and they have them year round, and they have them year to year. And if they mess up, they fix them immediately. And I did start thinking about that. Well, how come Kappa has them and Obama doesn't, or Brashear does not? And then somebody had a really good answer to that and said, PTO. The parents get in there, they find out what the needs are, and they demand for those needs to be met. And even if they have to give of themselves, they have to have so many fundraisers, they have to organize, they have to do all of those things to be advocate and get what their children need. Now, I can appreciate that. I also feel bad for the parents, maybe like what Christian was said earlier, who do not know these things. They don't know that the kids, they don't even know their child needs a computer. First off, they don't know that. And then they don't know that we can go in there, find out what's going on, and identify the need and find a solution for it. So advocacy, and also just the basic knowledge, that's where parents got to start. That's basic 101.
And thank you, Keysha, I agree. And I don't want to belabor that point, but I was going to say, so one of the things that I'm involved in is called the PLC, Pittsburgh Learning Collaboration, I think. I'm drawing a blank because I'm a little nervous. But we were, I was on a call this morning. Pittsburgh is really philanthropic. And so I was on a call with this PLC this morning where there are 70 plus local providers, a lot of whom, look like us and are doing great things in the community. And we have contacts for people that need computers. There's all kinds of things in the making to get more computers. But if parents don't even know that, and they don't even know what were to turn, because it seems like whenever the district utilizes providers or people to do trainings and things like that, they're never people from the community, hardly ever. So a lot of people don't know that all this stuff is available for parents, and it is. We have a parent hotline, which I should have given Sheree the link, but I'll drop that information in the chat.
Yes, I agree. And I think a good way to if you are a parent and you're on here right now and you don't know any of this, all this sounds like Spanish or Chinese to you, remember to think from the perspective that you are a taxpayer. You get up, you go to work every day. These people work for you. You're paying for them to be employed. So from that perspective, everything that the district has access to, you have the right to know about. You have the right to have access to. And I cannot, what Keysha said is so true about the PTO. I'm a former PTO president. When my kids were in school, I was the president of the PTO. There is so much that you learn about on the PTO. And you have to realize that a lot of these schools who are getting funding, it's what, Title I funding? They must have a PTO. They must have some type of parents organization. They're operating out of compliance with Title I funding if they don't have some form of parent organization. Mm-hmm. So you need to go to your school, find out if they're getting Title I funding, and even if they're not getting Title I funding, ask them why they don't have a PTO or why their PTO is not active, and volunteer to start one. Because that way you can get access and find out these intricacies about how your child is being educated and the resources that are going into their education. Because there's no reason why, I mean, a Chromebook, we talked about this on Facebook, about how a Chromebook, you can get a Chromebook for less than $100 at market value. Right. So if you're buying them in bulk, there's no reason why all of our kids shouldn't have some type of technological device in which to complete their schoolwork on. So we have to begin to, as parents, we've got to begin to understand that, like Keysha said, Kappa had Chromebooks because their parents advocated for them. They had technology because the parents are going to step out and say, we need this for our kids. So we have to realize this is the parent power panel. You got to take your power as a parent in your kids' education. And if you don't, then you have to expect that the system that was created that is not broken, that is in fact operating in the way it's supposed to, which is to make your children into servants, is going to continue to operate that way. So, you know, as we move on to this next question, I think if you haven't done so already, find out who your parent liaison is at your kid's school. Every school has a parent liaison, and start asking them questions about PTO. And if they tell you the PTO meeting is going to be held on a Wednesday at 9 a.m. and you know you have to go to work, ask them why does it have to be held at that time. Ask them if they can set up a Zoom meeting. Ask them if they can do it on a lunch hour. Ask them if they can do it at 8 p.m. on a Thursday so that you can make it. So, and
ask them if parents are part of the decision making at the beginning to decide where those dollars are going to go, because a lot of times by the time they let the parents know what they're doing with the Title I funding, the PTO hasn't been involved and parent voice is not in there. So again, there's that whole cognitive dissonance where they're deciding what's best for the students in the school, and then you found out on the back end. So ask if parent or your parent group can be invited to the meeting where they decide what they're going to do with the funds before they tell you what they're going to do.
Right. And I can echo off of Nichole because my husband works in education and he actually sells educational technology. And a lot of times with companies that sell education technology, the PTOs are raising money to purchase the educational technology. They reach out to my husband and say, hey, we need this, hey, we need that. How much is it going to cost? They put together a fundraiser. They go to their, whoever their parent liaison and says, we need X amount of dollars so that we can get this printer or this set of, was like online learning platform for our kids. So you have power as a parent. It's all about whether or not you're going to take advantage of that power or you're going to let it take advantage of you. So definitely everything everybody is saying is on point. The next question I have is about emotional wellness. And I know Nichole does a really great presentation on restorative practices, but parents right now, of course, some of our kids have emotional issues, have behavioral issues, have learning disabilities, and now they're at home. So can we give any tips? And I think Keysha probably has a great perspective on this because she works with these children every day. Some children who do have learning disabilities and are dealing with emotional wellness issues. What can we say to parents about how to manage their children's emotional wellness now that their kids are at home? And managing their own emotional wellness, because I can imagine this is probably overwhelming for some parents as well.
Interesting, because that was the word that was in my head: fatigued and overwhelmed. Not only our parents, the entire family, the children, everyone's fatigued and everyone's overwhelmed. As I talk to people, and even as I talk to myself, because I have little ones at home who I'm waiting for the schools to open back up. But we're overwhelmed, and I keep telling myself and other families, let's just have some grace during this time. We don't know it all, from your child's emotion to their schoolwork. We don't know it all. So extend yourself and extend your child a little bit of grace, and love above all. I know that sounds so cliche, but love your child through this process. And again, these are words I say to myself. Love him as he refuses to do his multiplication. Love him through it. And then just some tangible things. Be positive about learning at home. And like Christian said, well, he wasn't talking about that type of organization, but I was gonna say organize, set stations up, have it be a calm environment, a welcoming environment, be a role model for your child. So when it's time to sit and do work, you actually sit at a station and do your work and have them sit and do their work. Talk with your child through this process. I have a first grader, my daughter's starting first grade, and she's just confused. Why? Who decided to not open the schools so she can't wear her outfit to the first day of school? Who did that? So I have to talk her through the process to let her know this is what it is. And you may not be going to school until after Christmas time. You may not be going to school until second grade, whatever it may be. I just talk her through the entire process. So I have a couple more things, but I'll pass it on to someone else. But those are just some tangible things emotionally and physically that we can do.
Christian, you want to go before me?
I'm not saying nothing. I'm waiting for y'all, and I have a specific question for Christian.
Jump in like, well.
Okay, just a couple things, I guess. The main thing that I've seen is to not be so hard on yourself. If it wasn't a learning day that day, it wasn't a learning day that day. I know when we were in school, I would come in, and some days with the students, we wouldn't get but so much done because some big fight had happened that day and everybody wanted to talk about whatever and people were mad, and like Keysha just said, some kids are really confused, like I can't go to school and see my friends, what's up, and for as much as parents may want them kids out the house, the kids probably don't want to be up on the yard either. So, I would say just emotionally speaking, always kind of test the waters and always kind of be in tune with how are you feeling that day? How are your students feeling that day? If it's a productive day, you can definitely take advantage of that. And as Keysha suggested, set up your workstations and get busy. But if it's a lethargic day, don't try to make yourself do more than what you feel like doing. And, our kids vibe off of us. So if we're feeling lethargic, they might be too. So I would just say be easy on yourselves.
Definitely. Grace keeps coming up for me, as was already mentioned. Talking with your children and asking them how they're feeling, because at 40 plus years old, I'm learning that even when I think I know what the issue may be, whether that's with my kids or other parents, I'm learning more that you have to ask them what the issue is. And oftentimes you're surprised. So talk with them. And I focus a lot with my children and with myself on, let's focus on what we can do, not what we can't do. So what can we do to make this experience, what it needs to be? How can I help you? How can we help each other? And I also think that taking a holistic approach, so that whole like mind, body, spirit, that goes for our kids as well. And so honestly, I make sure that my children have a spiritual routine that helps them. I make sure that we get outside. We got a table on the porch. You take your side. Everybody got their headphones. We're working together ask me questions at this time. So get outside, take a holistic approach. Make sure you're exercising. Christian mentioned being lethargic. That's so true. And don't add a little bit of depression, which I think all parents right now are like trying to do a checkbox and make sure we aren't depressed and that our kids aren't depressed. So I think exercise helps with that. If you can, maybe get on a bit of a loose schedule, and I use that loosely, a loose schedule so that kids are getting sort of everything they need in each day, and then having those end times in the evening, like shut it off at a certain time. Like Christian said, if it didn't get done, God willing, tomorrow's another day. So that's what I would say. I've taken up some other stuff like making sure I'm doing things with my kids together. We say talk to them. Well, I took on, somebody in Brown Mama said, do puzzles. So we've been buying puzzles and we've been sitting together and doing those. It's an opportunity to talk. It's an opportunity for me to get mom's sippy cup, which may or may not be a little bit extra. And yeah, all that.
Can I say one more thing? Using your resources is something that I know to be helpful. So as we said, I work with youth for a living, right? And some people think I'm good at it, except my kids. So when I sit down with them to do homework, they're like, why, Mom? You can't do it with me, right? So I have to use my resources. And so with that, I start off again with the tutoring. There are organizations like, I think Gwen's Girls was offering free tutoring. Anyone in Allegheny County can have free tutoring. Tutoring is expensive. To hire a tutor is extremely expensive. So when someone's offering you free tutoring, you sign up immediately. Don't feel bad about it. Don't feel like, why can't I help them? You give that to someone else to do and let your child thrive in that environment. As well as places like Outschool offers classes for free. Varsity Tutors, they offer classes for free. And even these last 2 weeks, Pittsburgh Public has sent out some really good classes with like venture outdoors and things like that for STEM and STEAM classes that you're able to have your child enroll in. And it can be for fun where they let off some steam, or it can be for their core classes, that reading, that math, things like that. Find those resources and use them to the umpteenth power. With our organization, with Hope for Tomorrow, we offer those life skills and academic enrichment. And I tell parents, use us, send your child, and also help better us. If there's something we're not doing well, let us know. If there's something else, like I think Christian said earlier, that we're lacking that you need, you're probably not the only person that's lacking and needs that. So let us know, or let whatever organization it is know what you need, so they can give that to you. But definitely use your resources.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And I'm going to repeat some of those resources that Keysha mentioned, because I'll tell y'all, as a homeschooling parent, I always like to say, homeschooling is not what we do. We really do hybrid schooling. We do a little bit of unschooling, a little bit of deschooling, a little bit of tutoring. My kids have a math teacher. I do not do it at all. I figured out within the first 2 years of homeschooling, I could not do this on my own. I needed help. My husband subs a lot. So use your after school programs, use your tutors. Venture Outdoors has outdoor classes that you can put your kids on to go on nature walks, to go kayaking, to do all kinds of stuff. Outschool.net is my best friend. My kids do Outschool.net. Like, we've done so many classes on Outschool.net. And Varsity Tutors is, I don't know if they're new on the street, but I actually got an email from them a few weeks ago saying, can you find some people to sign up for these free tutoring? So Varsity Tutors also has free tutoring. I have on brownmamas.com, you can find a list of over 30 homeschool websites. So it's math classes, and most of the stuff is free. This is how Black people have been able to really make huge headway in homeschooling, because most of us started off thinking that we had to pay money for all of these different resources, and learn very quickly that there is so much free stuff online. I mean, you can get a subscription to, I think it's education.com, and it's like $30 for the year, and they give you lesson plans for everything. Anything you could possibly Google, you can find a lesson plan for on education.com. There are just so many resources out there. So if you're taking the homeschooling approach, or if you find that the learning that your kids are getting through PPS or whatever virtual space is not robust enough, there are tons of resources out there. I just found a website that allows you to get tons of Black history curriculum, lesson plans. I can't remember the name of it is, but it's on brownmamas.com. You can go find it. I don't know if Keysha can think of it, but I also wanted to ask Christian a specific question, because I know for me, when I first started homeschooling my kids, I have 3 boys. At the time I was homeschooling all 3 of them. Now my oldest graduated from high school, so he's not, well, he was in school anyway. We put him back in school, but now I just have my 11 and 12-year-old. How can moms, first of all, I want to talk about unrealistic expectations that moms have for their sons. And second, I want you to give us some tips on having boys at home.
Okay. Boys are,
Different.
I can virtually hear the parents of boys laughing, right? And if it's one thing, somebody put in the group, yes, my God. No, wait a minute. We're not that bad. I guess long term, let me just say to all the parents of the boys, if you got a boy that's just, you're like, oh my goodness, this child, when that boy gets my age, he'll be all right. We even out. I'm 28 going on, I'll be 29 in about a week. We even out. But the one thing about boys is that boys are very, boys are linear thinkers. Boys are also, I guess the technical term is hyperactive, but that hyperactivity really, as I like to say, is untapped intelligence. And that untapped intelligence sometimes manifests itself into physical activity. For example, when I was a kid, I liked to tinker with tools and stuff. And now here I am, I'm an architect. I like to build buildings. I fix my own cars, right? So we have to give our boys the structure that they need, definitely, to complete whatever the task it is that they need to complete academically. But also, we can't push the boys but too far, because they are definitely the type, if you push them but so far, they're going to run away from whatever the task is. If you give a boy a task and say, hey, here's the task, complete it or complete it by this time, then a boy will venture off by themselves and try to complete it. Now, will they do it correct? Maybe, maybe not. But at least that gave them the opportunity to build the muscle to develop their own kind of method to their madness and their own kind of critical thinking skill.
I know one of the things that I learned, Christian, with my boys, because like with my nieces, I can be like, okay, I want you to paint your nails, go down to the store, grab a jug of milk, and then come back and then sit down at the table and do your work. And they'll be like, all right, 1, 2, 3. Now with my boys, I have to give them one task at a time. And they'll tell me like, Mom, I can only handle one task at a time. You're telling me too many things. Another thing I learned about boys, do not expect them to sit still. They're just not gonna do it. Like you have to allow them to take that worksheet under the table to the kitchen. As long as they finish it, it doesn't matter where they do it at. But just know that they may not be able to sit in one spot while they do it. And then another thing I had to learn about my boys is just, I cannot ban video games. Like number one, video games are my leverage. So I'm like, if you don't do it, I'm taking the game. They're like, oh, okay, we'll do it. So I just had to learn that, like, as much as it bothers me to my soul, to the core of my soul, that my boys want to spend 2 to 5 hours every day on video games, I had to realize it's leverage, and there's an immense amount of learning happening when they're playing. So those are my tips on boys, but boys are a different breed. Just know that, Mom, like you're not the only one struggling. Somebody, Caprice, wanted us to address screen time fatigue. Do we have any tips on screen time fatigue?
Turn it off. I mean, I suffer from a condition called photophobia. So typically, if I would have had my glasses on today, my glasses are a red tint, and the tint is because I have a hypersensitivity to light. So I'm already very much so not into being on a computer, but for so long, not into being on my phone for so long, not being into anything that's too bright. You know, so that screen fatigue scientifically, if you're looking at something that bright over so many hours or so trying to accomplish a task, it can literally stop you from being able to successfully accomplish that task. So we have to be really realistic with ourselves about how long can I seriously be on the screen. I know for myself, I can, with 1 hour of uninterrupted work, I can get a lot of things done. you know, and for me, it's after about that hour 15, it's like, okay, I need to get up. Because the one thing boys don't stop do is being fidgety, even when we grow up. So it's like sometimes I got to get up and go, I don't know, clean out my car or something. So, and then come back.
I would say that there are some physical things that you can do to ease the fatigue. So like the lighting, something like your lighting should be about the same or a little bit dimmer than your computer. I know that makes a big difference. So like my son likes to work in his room and have the lights really dark, like actually a cave around him. And I have to fix that for him, that it's not that dark or as bright as my 17-year-old who thinks that she should have the big fluorescent mirror around her, like she's doing makeup. The light has a big effect on your eyes. Make sure that it's slightly dimmer than your computer screen. And then also your workstation where your computer is, it should be a little bit lower than your line of vision, right? Instead of straight ahead in front of you. And then the last thing would be maybe the text on your computer, making the text bigger so that way you don't have to strain to see it. And the more that you're looking at the screen, the more that you're fatiguing those muscles in your eye. So make the text bigger, that way it's much easier to be able to look at it. So the lighting, organize your station and increase that text on your computer. And then obviously taking breaks. When my child says they're tired, they're tired.
Agreed. And I also want to add, somebody had posted about the blue light screen protectors. If you have an older device, you can purchase a blue light screen protector, but actually most newer devices, if you just go into your settings, you can actually dim the light on your device so that it's not so glaring. And then also, I don't know if y'all see, the lighting in my room right now is great because we don't close our windows and curtains until late in the day. I learned that when I first started homeschooling my kids, because whenever we would keep the windows closed, nobody wanted to wake up. It was like everybody was just tired all day. But so I just started, as soon as we wake up in the morning, that's a part of our morning routine. Everybody gets up, we do what we call open up the house. So you open up the house, you open up the windows if you can, all the blinds, curtains, open those up. And then also, just another tip with boys have to work out every single day. Every day. They cannot miss a day. Like my boys work out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with dad. Tuesday, I just started working them out on Tuesday and Thursday with me because I was letting them miss Tuesday and Thursday. And I'm like, no, this is not going to work. So every single day they must work out. So whether that's, sometimes I just tell my boys, go outside and run around the house 12 times. Like you got to do 12 laps. Like somebody in the comments, Russell said, pool, bikes, walks. I mean, just remember, and then YouTube has skillions of workouts. Yep. Like you can literally just be like, yo, turn this YouTube video on and work out. But they need to work out every single day.
And Go Noodle is another one. Go Noodle.
Say that again, Keysha?
Go Noodle is something else that you can use for the active. You know, I have a child who, he better play soccer in the World Cup someday because he does not stop running and kicking a soccer ball and he won't stop. That's from him being half Gambian and half Jamaican. He's a soccer player. So when he has to keep going, he has to keep running. So we put Go Noodle on because he loves music too. So he stands there and he dances nonstop and does it. And that's part of that activity when they can't get outside or anything else. So you're right about YouTube, Go Noodle. And then just like Russell said, I see it also, kick them outside, go ride that bike up and down the street and get some natural sunlight. We need that.
Yeah, because I was going to say, Muffy, you know, I have all girls. I have granddaughters and a young daughter and a granddaughter. I have all girls. So that's true for girls as well, as far, you know, as I can tell. So while we're able to get out, that's what we're doing. If it's, you know, typically I'm like, all right, everybody, I have this thing where I say, disconnect from your electronic universe. And then does anybody have any suggestions? We're going to walk the dog and like do whatever. And we do that until like sometimes late October. So we still have a little while to get out and be active.
Yvonne had asked about resources for Swahili speaking families or families from Nepal. I'm not very sure on that. I have to be honest. So I'm going to have to leave that to somebody else who might have those, who may know of any of those resources. Does anybody?
So go ahead, Keysha. I was just going to say, so I had mentioned, and Saray also dropped in the chat for me, the information for the Pittsburgh Learning coalition and collaboration, I'm sorry, and the family hotline that I mentioned, working with A+ schools and a bunch of other providers. If you call the family hotline, we have a line for English and we also have a line for Spanish right now, but we're working with an organization that does translate messages that we get in other languages. So I would certainly say call the family hotline. We're just a group of organizations that take parents' question. It could be any question, and we will try to get the resource information as best we can.
Sorry, I was muted. All right, sorry, y'all.
I was going to say also that in Greenway, there's an organization, the Hope, it's with Debbie Julian runs it, and they were working with Swahili-speaking families. And I think it was with the Jewish organization. I can't remember, but I can get that and share it with the admins because they can help give that. But I know they were, because we had a lot of families coming into the community that spoke Swahili that needed that assistance.
So that even lends itself to like this whole idea of, my mind went directly to those parents. What are they doing for school, right? Who's helping them? Who's translating the information for them? Yeah, it's a lot.
Nichole, what's the name of the family hotline again?
It's literally called the family hotline.
And
so it's A+ schools started the Pittsburgh Learning Collaboration, and this sort of came partly out of that, where we were surveying parents and getting calls and hearing just all of this wide range of needs. So we got together with community partners that resource those things for parents. And so it's literally a hub of all these organizations that just work with parents and families in the city. They work with smaller organizations. Like we work with Gwen's Girls. We offer information about their tutoring. Right now, all parents are looking for childcare. So we've been giving parents resources around, Muffy, you mentioned some, the Bridge to Summer it was, now it's become Bridge to Learn. We're telling parents about grab and go meals that PPS is still doing at the schools. Just like all kinds of different resources. Call the family hotline.
Right.
Yeah.
absolutely. All right, next. Oh, and I forgot to mention, so Brown Mamas is starting a learning co-op, shameless plug. Brown Mamas is starting a learning co-op. So if you're interested in getting your kids outdoors a bit, during this pandemic, join the Brown Mamas Learning Co-op. Okay, this is a good segue because we're talking about the pandemic. What have we learned during this pandemic about the need for education reform? What do we think some of the biggest lessons that we've learned during the pandemic are that we should be sending, not our kids, but ourselves back to school with? These are the things we should be telling our administrators, educators, teachers, so on and so on.
Technological literacy. I think it's been such a either a crash or a slap in the face. For one, when the pandemic first broke, it was like, okay, we can't have the kids here. But then what do we do? And schools that had the laptops and all that good stuff, they were all right. The kids who had laptops and things at home, they were all right. Everybody else, it was like, well, what do we do and where do we go? And then even some of us, say, for example, say you're like an accountant, right? And you're helping your kid homeschool. There may be some things that technologically you just do not understand. And I know I'm speaking as a millennial here, but this pandemic has definitely put the spotlight on how technically savvy our schools are, our school districts are, our educational providers, and those of us that are adults, parents, and caregivers that are responsible for the health, safety, and welfare of these kids, because they're into it. They know what to do and how to do it. But if we don't understand it, we don't understand how to help, we don't understand how to monitor, none of it.
Right. So, when you mention education reform, I have a thought in regards to education reform overall. I think back to an article I read that talked about reform versus disrupting. So the reformers of past and present, President Bush with No Child Left Behind, President Obama's Race to the Top, Bill Gates and the Common Core implementation, all of these initiatives have relied on the business idea that disruption is a positive good, but that's disruption, not reformation. Reformation calls for more funding, better trained teachers, desegregation, smaller class sizes. It's disruption, it banks on a strategy of testing, competition, and punishment, which we all know turns out to be ineffective and harmful. So most school systems realize that they're going to have to develop new permanent systems redesigned to meet the needs which have been so glaringly exposed in this hurricane of a crisis, right? For example, we always had a large gaps in student learning opportunities in after school and out of school time, including the weekends and the summer. Our most disadvantaged children suffer the consequences of that gap most of all, where our well-off children have better opportunities during those gaps, the evenings, the weekends, the summers. So I'm hoping that we can learn through some things through the crisis about online delivery of not only instruction, but the many different opportunities for learning and support. In this way, we can make the most of this crisis to help redesign better systems of education and child development.
Yeah, I kind of echo what Keysha is mentioning. And also, I think that I'm learning more as I go along about, okay, this, system is doing what it's doing. And a friend of mine helped me understand that we've got to upheaval the entire system, right? Before, I think that I was operating from this like Band-Aid sort of mentality. And if we just, advocate about this thing and then this thing and this thing, but I am actually beginning to read and learn myself what I think, reform would look like. So something that I've recently been hearing about is sort of funding the families, right? And figuring out a process to get the funds to the families that, for example, PPS or all schools now that are at home doing remote learning, where's the money that was being spent per pupil now going? So I'm learning a little bit about, funding the families and then letting each family decide where those dollars could be spent to best educate their child the way their child needs to be educated in the environment that works best for them. And so that's what I'm leaning, largely to. And then I would say for people that don't really know where to start, so we don't really know where to start because schools start Monday and people still don't have what they need. They don't have laptops. So learning to advocate on a grander scale for overall school reform is probably down the line a little bit, but we've all mentioned these different organizations that can link you to how to do that. I know at A+ School, we train parents on, like I said, what the budget looks like, how that works, how can you have your voice be heard in that. And so it's going to take a lot of that, and it's going to take just an entire upheaval. I am optimistic about a lot of things that are happening. And one thing I just wanted to mention is how different universities and higher education folks are doing more to incentivize Black male teachers, right? I think that's huge. I think that's going to help be part of the reform, because if we redo the system, but we have the same people running the system, then we're going to get what we have already gotten.
Right.
I
love
agree.
that point that you made, Nichole, about funding the families. I was just listening to the 8 Black Hands podcast. I listened to them last week when they were on here, and I'm a fan now. Like, they're pretty dope. And that's one of the things that they were talking about, funding the family. And for me, my husband and I, we're raising 6 children. And over the years, we've had a lot of issues with our boys in public school, where I've gotten to the point that I feel like the system is not created for boys, for Black boys. I've just come to that conclusion, and I don't care about the data. I don't care. I think that's what it is. And so over the years, we've tried to pull the boys out and homeschool them, realizing that we could use the assistance to do that. And if the public school system is getting thousands of dollars a year and my child is not thriving in this system, pay me to do it. I can do it. I can take care of that. Or even like right now with the pandemic, my mother is a former teacher. So my siblings talk to her and say, why don't we send all our kids to you and you can care for them? Now, I am Jamaican. I'm a first generation American. That's not abnormal in our culture for the grandmother or for the family to raise that child. So when we talk about it, imagine if we could take the money from the public school system, give it to our elder and allow her to properly raise our children, as well as my grandmother who's in her 80s. She could, I don't want to say she could do a better job, but she can do an adequate job, better job than the school system is doing teaching our children. So I would love for that conversation to actually happen a little bit more, that we can get those funds and properly educate our children until the system is made whole.
And I think that's happening a bit more now with COVID, and sort of like Christian mentioned, everything is illuminated, like all the inequities and all the drama, has been amplified. And so I think people are doing exactly that, Keysha, like Muffy and what she's doing with Brown Mamas, and so I think we're headed in the right direction.
And just to mention before we go on break, because we have a message from our sponsor, Remake Learning. This is, when we're talking about homeschooling, we're not talking about something new. Black people are right now, African Americans are the largest growing group of homeschoolers in the United States. And also when we're talking about homeschooling, we have to realize that in many nations, developed, civilized, quote unquote nations, learning is moving outside of the classroom anyhow. So I feel like in America, what we really need is a massive movement to de-school. And what the de-schooling process is, it's relearning how to learn and looking at learning through a different lens so that we can make sure that it's equitable and so that we can make sure that it's actual learning and not just forced information. So learning is what happens when a person gets curious. Education is what occurs when we're trying to help people understand what the social norms of our society are. So it's two different things. So right now we are going to take a break and we are going to hear a message from our sponsor, Remake Learning. Mrs. Latrinda, I don't know how to say your last name, Latrinda. Latrinda, she's beautiful.
Sure, awesome. Yeah. I'm going to share my screen here. Thank you, Muffy.
Okay.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Latrinda Sherrill with Remake Learning. I will also start my video so you can see me. But wanted to give you a quick overview about Remake Learning, and we're so grateful to support the State of Black Learning every year. We care deeply about learning innovations. We care deeply about how young people are learning, especially our Black and Brown children in this region. And what I love about the State of Black Learning, it highlights best practices for our kids. And so wanted to share with you about the network of Remake Learning and how it can be a resource to you. Okay. So just quickly, this is an ecosystem. They exist beneath our feet. They're healthy. Some are less ready to thrive, but we have an opportunity to undergird these ecosystems with an infrastructure and a support to ensure that they thrive. And so that's where networks come in. And so this is a network. This is the Remake Learning Network. We're one of those folks that attempt to connect people, projects, funders, industry to the work that's happening in community. I love what Muffy said specifically about schooling moving more outside of or learning happening outside of the school day. And Remake tries to acknowledge as much as possible that there is formal education and there is education that happens outside of the school buildings. And there's beauty in work that happens when we marry the two, or when we, uplift the work that's happening in community. And so we definitely try to, support our educators as much as we can, but also empower those that are ensuring that learning is happening beyond the normal school day. And so we do that in a number of ways. This is how our network is connected. But we've been around for about 13 years. And so it started out when a number of colleagues across the space and the spectrum in Pittsburgh were noticing that there was this interesting intersection happening between technology, and innovation, and just a lot of things occurring that like didn't take place in the classroom. Lots of things, lots of people were being curious about learning, and people hadn't collectively grappled with this new technological shift. And over breakfast, a bunch of funders and nonprofit organizations got together to say, like, let's talk about what people are doing individually in Pittsburgh. Let's not duplicate work. Let's fund things together, and let's catalyze some more support for this new curiosity and learning, for this new innovation, for this new thing that we're seeing. And so, over the past decade, Remake Learning has grown into a network of over 500 schools, universities, libraries, and museums, nonprofits, government agencies, all working together to ignite engaging, relevant, and equitable learning for young people. And so we're a network, and that's what we seek to do. We want to identify learning that is truly engaging and relevant for young people, and learning that's equitable. We care about equitable learning practices in support of young people navigating rapid social and technological change. And so engaging, we mean learners have the support and the encouragement that they need to become active problem solvers, creators, innovators, and advocates. By relevant, we mean learners do work that's meaningful to their own interests, their own goals, and their lives. And then by equitable, we want learners to have learners with the greatest need to have the resources and the support that they need to thrive. And so we exist to share best practices, to spark new ideas, to make it easier for people to collaborate. We want to really reduce duplication and leverage resources collectively for impact. And so we know that one organization can't make it happen alone. And so we do see ourselves as a conduit to facilitate connections amongst different industry, amongst, in and out of school, and a number of folks who care about learning. And so these are our equity pillars. So we uplift learners in poverty, learners of color, particularly our Black and Brown young people, learners in rural areas, girls in STEM, and learners with exceptionalities. And so we operationalize our work in a number of different ways. And so once you get off of this, if you're not connected already, subscribe to our newsletter. We send out a bunch of different activities, options, resources, best practices, a whole bunch of stuff in our weekly newsletters. You can add yourself to our network directory. So our directory has over 1,000 people in the region that are working on learning and activities, and a number of different things. You have an event or something you want us to know about, you can submit it to our calendar. We just have a lot going on all the time, but we do our best to try to get those resources out to everyone. And so we convene people. We bring people together in so many different ways. These are some examples of ways we've brought people together, particularly in computer science, thinking about young people with exceptionalities, like the things that they need to support their learning, and bringing people together to get some professional development in that. And we host free public events. They're open to the public. We want people to have access to many of these things. And so we do a lot to coordinate and support individual members as they're moving their work along. So we have a bunch of working groups. I lead our STEM working group and our computer science working group. We champion a bunch of things, and we do that through Remake Learning Days. And so we have coordinated the largest open house for educators and learners, not only in Pittsburgh, but now we are across America in, I think, 17 different sites. But basically, it's an opportunity for people to just shine a light on the work that they're doing, but also to explore resources in their own community. And then we catalyze and empower network members to turn their ideas into action. So we always have mini grant opportunities. We always have new initiatives that we support. If you want professional development, we actually have a fund to support people to get more professional development in the region, because we know it takes money to do that. So we do have some funds for that. And so if you're interested, come and talk to us. But we help to broker relationships so people can have the impact that they want. And then we talk about it all the time. We have a blog, go check it out. tons of things on there, especially about remote learning, especially about innovative practices. You know, we do a lot to share what we're doing. And ultimately, our work is about people. Again, it's about this network, this ecosystem, and we never want to get distracted from that. And we have learners at the center, and we always remind ourselves that it's an honor and a privilege to be in service to that. And so you can connect with us on a number of these different platforms. You know, we're everywhere. We have a PGH STEM group on Facebook. So if you want to find out about all things happening in STEM, you can connect to that. But these are a bunch of different ways that you can get in touch with Remake Learning. And I will stop sharing now and go back to Muffy.
Thank you, LaTrenda. And I love Remake Learning. They've been very supportive of me as a homeschooler and as Brown Mamas in starting initiatives for homeschooling. So thank you so much for that. All right, so now we'll answer some questions. We have a lot of questions, so let's get to answering those. At the beginning, we were talking about, and it just says anonymous attendee, so I can't see y'all names. So I'm just gonna say anonymous attendee asked that we mentioned assimilation versus segregation at the very beginning. Do we think there is a middle path in terms of schooling, in terms of, we talked about that double-edged sword and, you know, not having very many whole options for our kids. So do we think there is a middle path between assimilation and segregation in terms of education? I don't think that there's one available currently, just FYI, but feel free to jump in.
That's a really, really good question, because assimilation versus segregation. So assimilation, going back to enslaved Africans and indigenous people being here, you were forced to assimilate. You could not speak your foreign tongue. You could not practice your foreign religions or things native to you. So it's kind of ingrained in us to assimilate, right? But one thing I see happening more in 2020 is that we are moving further away from the false impression that the US is a white nation with a marginal minority ethnic group, rather than being a diverse multicultural entity that is Black and brown as much as it is white. So I love to see that. I don't know if I can answer the question about the middle ground. I do know that what we teach our children, and again, our culture is ingrained in us. I am Jamaican through and through, and my husband, born and raised in Gambia, we are not assimilating. We are not taking on the culture that is here. At the same time, you know, I don't know if it's okay to say about code switching. So when I walk into a certain room, I may speak a little bit differently, but it's not necessarily to make you feel more comfortable or me to feel more comfortable. It's just, I'm still working through that in my own self. At the same time, with my teenage kids, they're walking in a room and they're not changing how they all are. Yep. And I'm having to look at that and say, is that okay to do? Do we need to tame it sometimes? Do we need to pull back sometimes? I may have the same question that you have. Now, I'm not sure about segregation. I'm just in my own self, I wouldn't go that far as to say segregation is needed, but I definitely don't agree with assimilation. I agree in maybe finding and identifying with your culture, and then that is what it is. That's who you are, that's what you do. Maybe share that with others, and then maybe that's the middle ground.
In terms of education, I would just say that I don't think it currently exists, but I think it is being created. I think that we are going to have to, if our society doesn't get to the place where it realizes that every culture has its own zone of genius that deserves to be embraced and that deserves to be spotlighted and highlighted as a part of their journey of learning, then I think that we're going to have to create that. And I think that Black people in particular are creating that. Keysha is creating that with Hope for Tomorrow. I am creating that with Brown Mamas. Nichole is creating that with the parents that she's engaging, and Christian is certainly doing it with Drafting Dreams. And of course, we're here because of Urban Academy, which is one of the best charter schools in the city of Pittsburgh. So I think we are creating it. I think a lot of times we don't give ourselves enough time. We have to realize that on paper, we were slaves for 400 years, but most of us know that it was a little bit longer than that. So I think that we have to recognize that we cannot be only 100 and some odd years, 150 years, I think it's a little bit over 150 years removed from slavery, and expect that these institutions are going to have been created, because we are still in recovery mode. We are still in this process of healing, and I think it's happening, but I think it's necessary and needed, and it is going to happen, because I think you have to accept, when you are talking about living in a melting pot society, you have to begin to accept that everyone is different, and that is okay. Like, it's okay that everyone is different. It's okay, because when we are all allowed to be our best in our zone of genius, then we can come to the table on equal footing and create a society that is actually equitable. But if we have a certain group of people who are never allowed to, because they're being forced to assimilate or segregate, they're never allowed to get into that zone of genius, then we're going to continue to have an equitable society. So I think we have to accept a certain degree of segregation and understand that that's okay, because segregation does not necessarily mean I don't like you or I don't want to be bothered with you. It's saying that some things belong over here and other things belong over here. Does not mean that we can't come together. So I think we just have to begin to look at these things with different lenses, because the lenses that we look through now are so traumatic based, are so based on trauma, that we don't really have firm footing for realizing the place for segregation and assimilation and why they are important parts of society. Because there's always a conversation that needs to occur between entities, but that doesn't mean that those entities cannot be great when they're separate on their own. So that's my philosophy on it. Does anybody else have anything they want to say? All right, so we'll take another question. Another anonymous attendee said, less students have been enrolling in teacher education programs over the years. With the COVID-19 pandemic and the state of education such as it is now, do you think it will ever be even harder to find good teachers? That's a good question. I don't want to answer this question.
I think the short answer is yes. Yes. It's gonna be harder, I believe.
If I can say, I think that it may be harder to find them, but for good reason. I think right now teachers are truly finding their power, that I don't have to go into a classroom to teach. I can create my own learning pod, or like you, Muffy, I can run my own homeschool cohort. I don't have to be in the classroom, and I can be treated better. I can be paid better. I can be more flexible. I can do that online, that outside teaching and things like that. I can do more cultural teaching. I saw a question there about using math for cooking. I can do that versus being stuck in the classroom and having to do this. I think teachers will find their powers, and they will start to, launch their own projects versus the traditional school system.
I think we have to look at, why is enrollment down? What is it about the nature of the teaching profession that makes people wake up and say, I kind of want to be a teacher, but that's not something I want to do? But they may have the desire to teach. So for example, I come from a family of educators. Everybody but my mom and I are teachers and assistant principals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for me as an architect to be able to teach it, it's like second nature. But the one thing that I have seen, going into different schools, is that there are some teachers that really just, they come to school and they have their cute little teacher apple things, and that's it. And a lot of those teachers are traumatizing our kids because they don't want to be there, And so we have to look at, well, what are the conditions of the profession that is limiting enrollment in these K-12 educational programs?
I know when I was on the PTO at my kids' school, and there were a few Black teachers in the school, and one of the things that I encountered a lot was like the teachers having to constantly reel themselves back in, especially since the school was predominantly Black. there were things that the teachers wanted to teach, but they could not teach because it was out of alignment with the goals of the school and with the curriculum and all sorts of those things. And I agree 100% with Keysha, because one of the things I found, I'm not an educator by heart. I really don't even like teaching kids. I'm gonna keep it 100%. I prefer to be around adults. But when I started teaching my kids, it was overwhelming, just the amount of resources and information out there and available for me to teach my kids. And I think a lot of teachers have known this, because what I found was that a lot of teachers had their own websites that I could actually go and pull lesson plans from, that I had no idea that teachers have been doing this behind the scenes for years. So I think teachers are finding agency and autonomy in a way that they've never found before. And so I think COVID-19 is going to make them, I'm hoping that we give more power to good teachers. Let's be clear, good teachers, because I've seen a lot of bad teachers. Nichole, I see your face. I know you have something to say, so I'm just going to put you on first.
Well, I mean, while you were saying that, I was thinking to the podcast from a few weeks ago where all the brothers and sisters were on there, and they were talking about this very thing. There were teachers that, you know, in the audience, I'm assuming, that were asking, like, how do I, you know, if I feel that I'm working in a particular setting and my hands are being tied, like, what do I do? And so they gave some really good pointers and some, you know, places for them to look for different curriculums and how to, you know, sort of mesh that information into what they were already teaching their students. And they had a really good point about, you know, how are teachers even teaching math and science and all of these different things that African cultures originated without talking about the Africans. And so, what, you know, in my own words, I'm putting that. And so that's what I was thinking about when you mentioned that, Muffy. And I've seen, I guess it will be hard to find good teachers. My mind automatically went to, you know, what Christian said about being able to advocate for teachers and, you know, how they're paid and what they're paid and all of the different systems that they have to operate within in order to be able to educate the students that they care about. Yeah, that's deep. I have a whole bunch of things going on in my mind, but that's what I want to say.
And not to mention, I think with COVID, we're going to find, again, I think that people in general have to have permission to operate in their zone of genius. And I think COVID is really going to push teachers to recognize whether or not this is your code of genius, your zone of genius. Like, are you really good at this, or are you just passing the time? And is there something you could be doing to contribute to our society better and more productively if you would just take up that instead of being a teacher? So, I mean, I hope we get more teachers, but I also hope that the bad teachers go away. Just go away. Don't come back. Find something else to do.
I guess one other thing I would like to mention about that too is what I'm seeing a lot of in Pittsburgh is that schools are beginning to utilize some of the community resources that they had shut out before. And so one of those examples is, like, there's a lot of work being done over here at Perry on the north side to make Perry the school of choice. And a lot of those changes are going into effect this year. And that had a lot to do with partnering with organizations in the community. Like Project Destiny, and, you know, you have all of these different people that will now be helping the people, the school administration, so the teachers can teach and the, you know, coaches can coach less, and then you have the support of the community, because they're the people that know the community anyway. They're going to get in there, they're going to know half the students. I know your mama, we grew up on the same street. Like, those relationships are already built. So I'm glad to see, I know I like to go into Langley. Keysha's there with Hope for Tomorrow. They have boxing going on. Like, there's all these different people from the community that are now being allowed to come into the school so that more Black students can build relationships and learn from people that look like them and know where they came from and where they need to be going.
And that's so, I think that where we are heading, Nichole, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I think where we are heading is what schooling needs to look like anyway. Like, you need to be surrounded by those people who know you. You need to be surrounded by those people who understand your cultural idiosyncrasies. Um, because that is how, I mean, I think about it. I went to an all Black Catholic school. I went to Holy Rosary when I was a kid. I did not act up because that teacher would whoop my butt. Like, she would take me outside. There was a thing we used to do called assume the position. You had to get on the wall like you was getting arrested. And my mom did not say nothing because she was like, no, that's what you're going to do. You act up in class, assume the position. Their thing was, you want to act like a criminal, you're going to be a criminal today. Okay? I'm not saying it was right, but what I'm saying was I listened. I went to class, I listened, I got my education because I knew I was there, because I knew that the people who were in the classroom were invested in me. They were banking on me making it so I would come back to the community. So I think we need those relationships, and it's just really important.
So, like, restorative practices, I swear by them. They have changed a lot of relationships in my life with my children and all, different people. But I would say too, whenever we do get back into the school buildings, if we do, I'd also like to see more people advocating for the restorative practice program that's already within PPS, right? But having it better funded so that you have people that are trained in restorative practice coming into the school buildings, not, one or two people that's swirling around the whole district, and support that, because that's where the relationships can begin to be built if they aren't already.
Yeah, I agree. And then the last, well, there's two more questions. We'll see if we have time. But this other question is about special education. It's Caitlin. She's from Austin, Texas, and she wants to know if we have resources, strategies, or ideas for responding to education in special education, or do we know any places where we can look for those resources, strategies, information? I have nothing on that. So, anybody got anything?
Can you repeat the last part of the question?
Sure. She asked if we have any resources, strategies, or ideas for responsive education in special education, or do we know a place where she can find them? I don't know about special education.
Yeah. Honestly, that's been one of the struggles. So I've been manning the family hotline that we talked about, and I am getting a lot of even physicians that are calling in saying that they have families that, so for example, within the district, your students may have like an IEP or whatever, and the supports that were within the school buildings themselves are now, I guess, being shared remotely. And so a lot of students with different exceptionalities aren't able to benefit from it remotely. Like Christian talked about, some of them can't, don't want to be still that long. It's too much screen time, things like that. So I am hearing from a lot of families that there aren't a lot of resources. I hope I'm wrong and I'm misinformed. I personally have been looking for more, and I have not had much success this week even.
Right. I can agree with that. Even when you talked about the remote learning, it's not a sustainable model for education across the country. We know that. And many special education students are suffering from the lack of in-school instruction and support measures, which don't exist in home for them. I know that when I've worked with families with youth special education students, a lot of times they go through their insurance provider and are afforded behavior specialists and things like that, which may not be the best route to go, but they can help with identifying or getting you into like an IEP, having an IEP for your child, and then you're able to get more services that route. I do say personally, be careful with that before you have different titles or labels placed on your child, and then they begin to challenge them less academically and intellectually. But that is a route that you can go, just being very hands-on. If they can identify that IEP and come up with a plan, then that's one step. But I'm so sorry, I don't have more information. That is an area, that's a deficit, absolutely.
Yes.
And then the last question we had, how do you work math and reading into daily activities such as cooking, fractions, division, and subtraction? I can answer that a little bit because I did chemistry with my oldest son, and it was not, I thought it was going to be really difficult, and it was not hard because I used a cooking with chemistry curriculum to teach him chemistry. I would say go online. There are tons of curriculums and lesson plans to help you to do that. Even with fractions, my middle son loves baking. He cooks all the time, constantly. He bakes cookies and all types of cakes and stuff. And so he does a lot of, he learned fractions pretty much through baking. You can get, one of the pieces of advice, I had actually reached out to a chef to find out how I could help him to become more professional in his techniques. And they told me to buy him, what do they call them? I guess they're like chef grade cooking books. So there's the cookbooks you get at the regular store, and then there's cookbooks that you get that are actually for teaching chefs in training. So you can get those on Amazon. That's where I found some of them, and they really, really do a good job of teaching the science behind the cooking versus just teaching the cooking. The kitchen is a great place for math, at least for that I found for my kids. And then also building projects. If you have, even if you just have a front porch and you can get yourself a door and two, what are those things called? Christian, you know what they are. It's like you can sit a door on top of them and basically make a workbench, like a work table. Mm-hmm. Those things, what are they called? I can't remember what they're called. But you can do that. And if you can get a small saw, you can get a saw for like $30, $40. There are tons of building projects you can do with your kids. I have a book, it's called the One Board Build, and you can build a whole bunch of stuff, boxes, little bookcases, just using one board, one piece of wood. So just start to think outside of the box. Like there are tons. Stop thinking about learning as what you do on a worksheet or what you do in a book. Start thinking about, okay, let's get up today and go for a nature walk. Your kids learning science. They could potentially be learning about chemistry and biology and anatomy just out on a nature walk. So I would just say, try your best, if you have the ability to, if you're not stuck in front of a computer, to stop thinking about learning as books and start thinking about learning as anything you can do in life. Christian, I know you got probably some stuff.
Yeah, you know, when math and fractions came up, that's what Drafting Dreams, that's what we do in teaching architecture to students, and we feed it to them in a way in which they don't even know that they've just learned how to add a half and a fourth. But you know, with everything that we do with the kids, we like to, it's very hands-on. So we have very standard activities where we teach them how to design their own one-bedroom house, and they use the architect scale. An architect scale has varying measurements. You can go and buy an architect scale from Staples, but the architect scale has varying measurements where you're taking like 10 feet and 1 foot is equal to a half of an inch, or 1 foot is equal to a fourth of an inch. And so now you can, of course, use that scale to create those dimensions, but then you can also challenge your student by flipping the scale over and giving them the regular side. Okay, here is 1 inch, and if an eighth of an inch is a foot, then how many feet are in 1 inch? And, you know, just really quickly, right, there are 8/8 in an inch. So that would mean that there would be 16 feet in an inch if, in fact, you equated 1/8 to 2 feet. So there's some ways that you can kind of really sneak that in. And to Muffy's point, a lot of different building projects. This summer, we just got done building an obstacle course with some of our students, kindergarten through about maybe 7th or 8th grade. And it forced them to have to use the tape measure. And of course, using the tape measure, sometimes you have those odd and end type dimensions, and they have the fractions on it. So I think the main thing is getting kids to be able to see the real world application and to actually have to visually understand the math. We had instances where kids cut something too short. So that, I mean, clearly you did the math wrong. It came out wrong, you know, or like baking. if something's too salty, you did the math wrong. You were supposed to put a half of cup of salt, and you put a full one in. So stuff like that. And I think reading, the one thing I like to emphasize with my students, because we have gotten into teaching reading comprehension. Because one thing that I have understood is that a lot of times we as Black folk, we are not taught reading comprehension to the point to where we grow up and find ourselves into financial traps because we did not read something, or we read it and we didn't understand what those string of definitions of those words meant. So when it comes to reading, that can be as basic as, maybe you bought a new toy, maybe you bought them a new PlayStation, and they got to put something together. Make sure they read those directions adequately. Maybe, okay, it's hot in my room. All right, buy them a fan and have them put it together. Stuff like that would actually get the shot to read it and possibly fail if they didn't read the directions correctly, and then having to go back and reread and ask questions about, well, what does this word mean and how do I apply it?
And I have 3 tips. So one, the secondhand store. So one of the things I used to do with my oldest son all the time, I would take him to the secondhand store, let him get any device, toasters, old printers, then we would break them and have them put them back together. It's a great way to help your kids to understand how things work and to help them to understand that everything is fixable. Like, you don't have to this day, my oldest son gets mad at my husband if he calls somebody to fix something. He's like, no, I can fix it. I don't know why you call somebody. So that's, if you have a builder kid, a kid who likes to use their hands, try that. Second, if you have gamers, get them the big video game books. They literally have books that are like this big on Call of Duty, on Fortnite. They will devour those books. My youngest son does not like to read. He hates to read. Anytime I talk to him about reading, he's like, that's stupid. The only thing he wants to read is those big old video game books. But they'll read them because they tell them how to win on the game. So they'll read, they're like, oh, we'll read that. Yeah, because it's useful. And remember that when you're teaching your boys. Boys have to have a reason. If there's no reason for them to learn it. So they're not going to learn it. I mean, I'm just keeping it. For y'all to have boys, they're not going to learn it if there's no reason, because they don't care. Boys are action oriented. There's no reason for me to do that, so I'm not going to do it. And then also, there's this little small book that that Webster's puts out. It's called the Vocab Builder. Every parent should have this book in their house. And what it does is it breaks down every single word in the American dictionary, in the Webster's dictionary. It breaks it down into small bite-sized words. So what I used to do with Jair when he was in middle school, we probably started him off doing that when he was in 8th and 9th grade, was we would give him the vocabulary builder and have him write down, because it's not full words. It's like, so if there's the word, I'm trying to think of a word, perspective, it will break it down into syllables and it will help them understand what each syllable means. So that way, when they go to read bigger words, they understand what the syllables mean, so they can automatically understand what the word means because they put it together in terms of the smaller words. So I would highly recommend, if you don't hear nothing else I say, get that vocab builder book. Give them 3 of those little small syllables every day. And I tell them, write the syllable, write the definition for the syllable, and then write me 3 words that include the syllable in a sentence for at least one of them. They have to do that every day, hands down. Their vocabulary, what's the name of the gamer books? All video games have gamer books. So whether it's Minecraft, Fortnite, Call of Duty, they all have gamer books. All you got to do is go on Amazon and just look up the books. They have they're like huge, like encyclopedia like books for gamers, and you can just buy the books and have them read the books. But the key to that is, don't tell them they can have a book and then don't tell them they can't play the video game, because then they're not going to do it no more. That's not gonna make sense to them. So yeah, but I really recommend that vocab builder book. So, and the secondhand store too is a good place to start.
Those are
I
all
don't know
great.
how much. Say that again, sis.
Those are all great tips.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, and then we have one last question. Oh no, I don't know if this is a question.
And Christian's tips. I got everybody's tips. They were great.
I'm wondering how to support students with exceptionalities such as ADHD, autism with restorative responsive practices. Their needs are different, so it's likely these practices also need to meet their needs in a different way. So I'm guessing she's asking about restorative practices in terms of kids with ADHD, autism, and other learning exceptionalities.
I'm not aware of any specific like frameworks, but I have done a few trainings and been in different spaces where I've like maybe done circles with students that you don't know what or if they have exceptionalities, right? In fact, you know that some of them do, but you don't know who they are. Sometimes you could kind of figure it out, but you don't know who they are if you're coming in for like to train. For example, we went to a district in Alabama, I think, and trained some teachers and some students. And so one of the things that I would think would be helpful was if you use as much as you can, use like the general restorative practice framework, and then engage those students that are able to in a way that they kind of do the work themselves. So for example, we trained a bunch of students at one particular district because they were using those students as to do peer mediation, right? And what they did was they picked, for the most part, their students that a lot of times were considered challenging, or, you know, like we talked about different different ways that those conditions like manifest themselves. So a lot of times they're busy, or they might get into a lot of fights. They might have a lot of different disagreements and get agitated easily. So they took some of those students and trained them to be the like peer mediators and be the ones that were initiating some of those relationship buildings and stuff with other students. I guess that kind of answers the question. I don't know if there's a specific framework, but I can see how the regular restorative practice framework might be able to benefit students with exceptionalities if you kind of manage them that way. I hope that was helpful.
I can speak to at least the restorative practices regarding students that have ADHD. I tend to work with a lot of them, and actually my nephew has an ADHD diagnosis. And I think the main thing about students that have ADD or ADHD is there's a gross misunderstanding of what they can and cannot do, and what they can and cannot understand and process. And especially the kids that have been diagnosed with ADHD, I always tell people, you got to remember the H, the hyper part. And the hyper part is not, I mean, hyper, I wish we had a different word for it. But the hyper part of that diagnosis is definitely the crux of what is distracting the attention. So things have to be highly, highly engaging and highly, highly, hands-on. So say, for example, if my nephew got into a fight with a kid down the street over something silly, and, instead of being like, oh, I'm going to put you in timeout or whatnot, because younger me would put him in timeout, and he'd be standing there like, all right, I can out timeout you. Maybe it's something that is more engaging, like, okay, well, why don't you maybe, I don't know, you all got into a fight about this thing. If that was the thing that was the conflict, why don't you, I don't know, try to offer this, or maybe have some sort of game or have some sort of something to where that bond can be repaired, and it's not necessarily this child having to go through these rote practices. We got to be real creative with our students that have exceptionalities, because in a lot of those cases, especially with autism, we've even had some students come through our program and do the architectural software that were varying spectrums of autism. But the main thing is being able to understand at what level, do those students compute information, right? Some of them think really fast and their motor skills can't keep up, or some of them, their motor skills are going and it's like their mind is not keeping up, So I think it's about being very, very creative about how do we make sure that students are highly engaged in things that are a little bit outside of the box, or what restorative practices call for.
And if I can throw in, I see some people are responding to social stories, and that was going to be my thing. I have a son who's has ADHD, and the social stories has been big for us, especially when he was younger. Giving him the opportunity to examine how his behavior is impacting the people around them and kind of reinforcing that. That's kind of the best way that we've been able to help him over the years. I mean, because restorative practices are based on a simple premise. Human beings are happier, more cooperative and productive, and they're more likely to make positive changes in their behavior when the people in position of authority are doing things with them rather than to and for them. So once you understand that basic premise, then simple things like social stories can assist.
And that makes a lot of sense because my kids who are now running around in the background, they do this thing on their own. Like it's something that I don't even have to do with them, where they basically role play and they make up stories and they keep the stories going all day. So in the morning, somebody will say something like, I don't know, one of their Fortnite characters punched somebody in the face. And then they'll say, oh, well, what happens next? Well, next he jumped off the building and he did this. And then he did this. And they'll say, Mom, what happens next? And then I have to make something up. And that makes them feel, that was one of the ways that I got them to start writing. Because I would say, oh, well, write it down for me. Write the whole story down for me. I want to see it. But that makes a lot of sense, too, in terms of working with boys, because I know boys, they're very action-based. So when Russell had posted about social stories, I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense as a good way to get boys involved in, creating their own realities. So I think that we have to wrap up now. So in order to wrap up, what was I going to do? Let's just give one piece of advice to parents right now, each one of us, and then we will throw it back to Chase. Except for me. I'm not giving the advice. Y'all gonna give the advice.
Okay. One piece of advice for parents, I would say, know what your kids should know when they should know it. Whether you're homeschooling them or they're in a school building or a learning co-op or whatever, understand what your kids should understand when they need to understand it. And if your kids are in a regular school building and you've got to be proactive and you've got to let the teachers know that you understand that and that you are holding them accountable to whatever degree they should be to making sure that your kids are getting what they should be getting when they should be getting it.
I love that.
I guess I would say that families need to reinvent the wheel a little bit. I'm kind of facetious in saying that, but the current wheel is a square and it's not working. It's not working. It was never intended to work. We need to be creative and adaptable in meeting the needs of our students, of our children. Coming hand in hand with that, you also need to know your child. My husband and I have 6 children and they all have a different personality. We need to know each of our children individually, know what works for them, know what does not work for them, better ourselves in understanding that, and then help our child holistically, mind, body, heart, soul.
I would say your biggest weapon is knowing what you don't know and how to find that information. So, be very clear and be honest with yourself about what you don't know and what you can't do, and begin to seek, okay, well, who does? So, and not be afraid to be able to do that. Somebody near you, your neighbor, somebody, whoever, has the answer to whatever question it is you might have, or is probably working on finding that thing out or learning about that thing or digging deeper into that thing. So I would definitely just kind of challenge and charge parents to, like I said, know what you don't know and then look for somebody that may know it and not be afraid to do so. Once you go running towards a thing, it'll definitely come towards you.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Keysha. Thank you, Nichole. We appreciate your time. Thank you, parents and educators and caregivers and people who love on kids for listening. We appreciate you. And thank you, Chase, for making us this opportunity even available to us to speak our truth.
Thank you.
Thank you, Muffy. Thank you, Nichole. Thank you, Keysha and Christian, for helping us to wrap up the fourth session of the third State of Black Learning Conference. We appreciate you, we love you, and we look forward to seeing you in person very, very soon. In fact, thanks to our friends over at Manchester Academic Charter School and with the Grable Foundation, we will be continuing the work of the State of Black Learning over the next few months in order to bring us back to the times when we are in fact in person. And so we'll be sharing that information out with the State of Black Learning Network in the next few weeks. Let me say this. Zoe Sayward said, "Don't wait for the perfect moment. Take the moment and make it perfect." I believe fundamentally that we are in a battle for the minds of a generation of Black boys and girls. Not only are we fighting the pandemic of racism and oppression and bigotry, but we're also living in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic and crisis. This will be the story of our lifetime. How did we act and react? What did we champion? Who did we champion for? Who did we save? Who did we leave behind? The question is, who are you? Who are you as an educator and a teacher? Who are you as a parent and a community leader? Who are you in this moment in time, and what will you be once you've left this planet? The time is now to determine whether or not you're in it to win it for the Black boys and the Black girls that we fight for every day at the Urban Academy and that the State of Black Learning was designed to champion. We cannot fail us too. So on behalf of everyone at the State of Black Learning, I want to say thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for joining us and supporting this work. Please follow us on Facebook. Check us out at www.stateofblacklearning.com. Please give it up for Carice Stevens, who pulls this together every year, for all of the folks here at the Urban Academy, for all of the members of the State of Black Learning Planning and Founding Committee. Thank you all so much. Stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask, but don't be afraid to do what's right when it's right. DJ Nate, the show is yours, brother. Be well, folks.